In the glimmering spotlight of Hollywood, where glamour meets the grit, a compelling story was unfurling. This case is very scary. It shocked all the friends of the female protagonist Amie, which is what we will talk about today. Amie Harwick, a well-known Hollywood therapist, was born in 1981. Amie's biological parents abandoned her right in the maternity hospital. She was soon adopted by another family. Amie grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. At 20, she moved to Los Angeles with plans to earn a degree in psychology. But she needed money to get by, so she worked as a bartender and dancer instead of attending college, performing at nightclubs and parties all over the city. Amie even had her own fire act. Years passed, and Amie worked hard, earning her master's degree in clinical psychology and later a doctorate in sexology. She started her own private practice, taking on challenging cases that other therapists often refused. Many of her clients were adult film actors and other professionals from the sex industry. Amie's close friend, Robert Koshland, noted that she developed a morbid fascination with death. She was obsessed with the topic and even purchased a real coffin for herself. She also amassed a collection of genuine poisons, which, while aesthetically intriguing, were rather eerie. In 2017, Amie met 60-year-old Drew Carey, a comedian and popular TV host. During one of his shows, Drew introduced Amie Harwick as his beloved girlfriend on Valentine's Day. "I met her at a producer's party who threw incredible Hollywood shindigs. It was 2017, and Amie was moonlighting as a bartender at the party. I simply couldn't ignore such a star," Drew shared. For their first date, the smitten couple headed to Disneyland. Drew was astonished at how much Amie attracted him. He was genuinely in love. Drew confessed that he had numerous insecurities about his body and disliked his appearance. But all these insecurities vanished when he was with Amie. She was incredibly welcoming. Amie found Drew to be very sexy and an incredibly hot man. By the end of 2017, Drew and Amie were engaged. Drew Carey vividly remembers, "We had great times together. We could be in the kitchen and just start dancing spontaneously." Being well-known personalities in Los Angeles, Amie and Drew began to notice negative anonymous comments popping up on doctor review sites. Amie feared for her reputation as a psychotherapist. She was convinced that these comments were from an ex-boyfriend, Garrett Pershaus, who had been intensely jealous of her relationships with other men. Over time, tension began to seep into Drew and Amie's relationship. Frequent disagreements, often stemming from Drew's work commitments, led them to seek therapy. Despite these efforts, the relationship did not survive. Drew and Amie peacefully parted ways and ceased communication. In 2020, on the eve of Valentine's Day, Amie suddenly sent Drew a message. "I'd really like to meet up and talk." Drew responded, "Yes, I want that too. I love you." On the morning of February 14th, 2020, Amie met with her friend Cleopatra Slough. They planned to stroll around Los Angeles together. Cleopatra recalls, "I arrived at Amie's house. She had invited me in because she wasn't ready. We went up to her beautiful bedroom. There was a cute balcony, natural light, and she got ready quickly. At the last minute, she grabbed a small red cardigan." During their walk, Amie played the local guide. As they traversed the winding streets of the Hollywood Hills, Amie showed her friend various landmarks she loved, telling stories about the area. The girls then stopped for breakfast at Beechwood Cafe. Amie opened up to Cleopatra about her happiness and how well her life and career were progressing. From the outside, everything seemed to be going perfectly. That evening, Amie was due to attend a burlesque show at the Globe Theater. She had dressed in a beige velvet dress, black leather jacket, boots, carried a handbag, and wore a beaded necklace with a cross. The burlesque show started around 7 p.m. There, Amie met up with her friends. They took group photos on a small Kodak film camera. Around the time Amie and her friends were taking photos at the show, her neighbor, Michael Herman, was asleep in his upstairs bedroom. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a dish shattering. He thought it was his upstairs neighbor, Amie Harwick, making the noise, and drifted back to sleep. Looking at the photos of Amie and her friends taken that evening, you'd think they were all blissfully happy. Miss Tosh, a friend of Amie's, commented, We were all so thrilled about celebrating the show. We had such a good time." Around 9 in the evening, after the burlesque show concluded, Miss Tosh asked Amie to come to an after-party. Amie replied, "No, I'm going to have tea with my friends. I love you." That was the last time Miss Tosh saw Amie. Harwick and her friends left the Globe Theater and headed to another venue called the Nomad to socialize and have tea. They stayed there almost until midnight. Around 1 in the morning, Amie arrived home and sent a message to her friend Sarah Rollins asking her to send the photos from the Nomad. Amie wrote, "Send me the photos on the green couch." This message was sent at 1:02 a.m. Then Amie climbed the stairs to her third-floor room. That's when she was attacked. The screams coming from her room instantly woke up a neighbor. She heard the sound of bodies hitting the floor and Amie's muffled screams, as if someone had covered her mouth. Unable to find her phone, the neighbor started screaming to scare off the attacker. She then ran for help, only to find herself trapped in her own yard. She climbed over a tall metal fence and injured herself. She ran to the neighboring house for help, but no one was eager to open the door at that hour. Fortunately, a man with a phone was passing by, and they called the police. When the police arrived, the time was 1:14 a.m. They found Amie lying on the street beneath her bedroom balcony. She was still alive and struggling to breathe. She had serious injuries and marks on her neck, signs of an attempted strangulation before she fell from the balcony. At 2:05 a.m., Sarah Rollins, who had no idea that her friend was fighting for her life, sent the photos on the green couch. Amie Harwick was taken to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. At 3:26 a.m. on February 15th, she was gone. Investigators found signs of a violent struggle in Amie's home. There was blood on her bedroom door. They also found traces of her beaded necklace, which she had worn earlier that evening. The trail led from the living room, through the bedroom, and out to the balcony. There, they found a syringe filled with fluid. Given that Amie did not smoke, drink, or use illicit substances, the syringe obviously did not belong to her. It had been left by her assailant. Amie's close friends, Cleopatra Slough, Gray Stanley, and Robert Koshland, soon heard the news that their 38-year-old friend Amie Harwick, whom they loved dearly, had passed away. Initially, nobody could believe that Amie was gone. Drew Carey learned about the death of his former love after the crime scene witnesses' questioning had ended. Overcome with grief, Drew broke down in tears. He could barely stand. After the tragedy, many of Amie's friends speculated about who might have committed this terrible crime. They unanimously pointed to Gareth Pursehouse, her ex-boyfriend. Amie's close friend, Robert Koshland, went to the police station and told investigators what he knew about Gareth Pursehouse, an ex-boyfriend Amie had dated years ago. Gareth was a software engineer, comedian, and photographer. Robert claimed that Gareth had attacked Amie multiple times, and indeed the police found reports and 2 restraining orders Amie had against Gareth. In a report from April 2011, she wrote, "Gareth Pursehouse knocked me down, covered my mouth to stop me from screaming, and kicked me," the report read. Later, in mid-May, there was another statement from Amie. "We had numerous fights where Gareth Pursehouse choked me, pushed me against the wall, kicked me, threw me to the ground, banged my head on the ground, and punched me." After the fights, Gareth would come to his senses and apologize to Amie, saying he was sorry for the fight, professing his love for her. In the early days of Amie and Gareth's relationship, things were very different. Amie had long wanted to find a good, reliable guy. Meeting Gareth, she was confident she had found her dream man. He was very charming, with a handsome, athletic figure. However, he started forbidding Amie from seeing her friends. In time, Amie admitted Gareth was abusing her and reported this to the police. Friends repeatedly advised Amie to leave him. Amie agreed that she needed to end the relationship. In 2012, she told Gareth she no longer wanted to be with him. He took the news poorly and became obsessed with Amie. He started stalking her, trying to find out where she was and with whom, asking their mutual friend Arudi Toros to send her photos and love songs. Amie Harwick had no intention of reconciling with her ex-boyfriend. On her YouTube channel, A video on how to survive a breakup appeared. Amie shared useful information on this topic close to her heart. Harwick quickly moved on from her ex and seemed to bloom anew. 4 years had passed when one day an intruder broke into her house and stole her photo albums and computer. The woman suspected it was the work of Gareth Pursehouse. However, no evidence of his guilt was found. After this incident, Amie became anxious and felt she was constantly being watched and surveilled. Amie was convinced that the offensive comments she had been receiving online for many years were from Pursehouse. He also sent messages to her friends, urging them to stop communicating with Amie. On January 16, 2020, for the first time in 8 years, Amie ran into Gareth. Psychotherapist Amie Harwick had been invited to the annual XBI's award ceremony. There she met Gareth, who was working at the event. Amie tried to maintain her composure, but as soon as Gareth saw her, he flew into a rage. He yelled at her, "You ruined my life!" At that moment, about 100 people were in the hall, and everyone heard Gareth's horrific screams. Then he began to sob, fell to the floor in a fetal position, and wept. After the show, Amie and Gareth talked privately away from everyone for 45 minutes. The guards kept a close eye on them. Her friend, Robert Koshland, recalled, "She told me that she had stepped into her role as a therapist, talking to him, and told him that he needs to continue living his life without fights. She felt she had persuaded him." Amie was upset and agitated. She asked Robert, "I want to share my phone's location with you. If anything happens to me, it's him." Amie planned to buy pepper spray and wanted to beef up the security of her home. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Gareth, Amie called her relatives with an unexpected request. She told them that if she were to die, she wanted an open casket funeral and a beautiful tombstone. Then, just a day before Valentine's Day 2020, Amie sent a message to Drew Carey. The man was happy and thought it would be great to see Amie again, but it was the last correspondence Drew had with Amie. News of the prominent psychotherapist's death shocked the entire country. 13 hours after Amie Harwick's death, detectives appeared at Gareth Purshouse's house and charged him with Amie's murder. In his home, they found a syringe similar to the one discovered on Amie's balcony. The syringe was filled with a nicotine solution. Suspicion arose that Gareth had planned to use the poison to take Amie Harwick's life. In September 2021, a year and a half after his arrest, Gareth Pursehouse appeared before the Supreme Court of Los Angeles at a preliminary hearing. Cameras were not allowed into the hearing. Prosecutors discussed Amie's autopsy, which documented wounds on her hands and wrists and around her eyes. Burst blood vessels indicating strangulation were found on Amie, along with bruises on her neck. But was Gareth Pursehouse guilty of this crime? Prosecutors presented evidence. DNA materials extracted from the door and floor in the living room matched Gareth's DNA. His DNA was also found under Amie's nails. The struggle between Amie Harwick and the criminal lasted about 6 minutes. The defense at the hearing questioned, were these DNA samples correctly collected and tested? And was Gareth there at all that night? A neighbor's surveillance camera recorded Gareth at the location that night. The man covered the camera with his hand. However, police were still able to make him out, or at least a man who looked very much like him. Gareth Pursehouse pleaded not guilty, and his lawyers claimed that none of the evidence collected by the prosecution proved that he had committed the crime. They argued that even if it had been Gareth, Amie's fall from the balcony could have been just an accident. Amie's friend, Robert Koshland, stated that it was indeed Gareth who had committed this horrific crime, as he had intentions to kill his ex-girlfriend. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought along a syringe filled with nicotine. Although very rare, there have been crime stories related to lethal doses of nicotine. For instance, the case of Paul Curry, who was found guilty of poisoning his wife, Linda, with this toxin in 1994. Dr. Neil Benowitz, a leading nicotine specialist who wrote a report about the Harwick case, explained, "If you take it orally, through the mouth or through the skin, it takes much longer because absorption takes some time. But if you inject it intravenously, You could die within a few minutes. At the hearing, Amie's friends testified about her fear of Gareth and the measures she took, including a home security system, purchasing pepper spray, and permitting Robert Koshland to track her phone. After her death, Robert discovered Amie's email password and revealed that he had found possibly the most crucial piece of evidence against Gareth, a letter written by Amie herself. Amie used her email to document an encounter with her ex-boyfriend at the X-Biz Awards ceremony. She wrote, "He started screaming, 'You shouldn't be here. Why are you here?' He was sobbing, contorting his face upwards and shaking violently." Forensic psychologist Chris Mahandi commented on Amie's message. "This email is the voice of what Amie Harwick experienced. In it, she also writes, 'I'm scared because he was obsessed with me for 9 years. He's angry, very smart, and focused on hurting me.'" This email helped to understand that Amie Harwick would never have invited Gareth over. She wanted nothing to do with him and was very afraid of him. None of Amie Harwick's acquaintances believed that she had fallen from the balcony by accident or intentional self-harm. A close friend of Amie's, Grace Stanley, testified at the hearings and provided a message from Amie in which she expressed her fears about Gareth. Grace revealed that Amie never liked to write much about Gareth. It seemed that he was watching her, and she always felt it. After 6 days of witness testimonies, the judge ruled that there was more than enough evidence to arrest Gareth Pursehouse for the crime involving Amie Harwick. Gareth was not charged with stalking. He pleaded not guilty to causing Amie's death. However, psychologist Chris Mahandi believes that if the accusations are true, Gareth should also be charged with obsessive stalking. The psychologist speculated that Amie probably felt sympathy for Gareth, tried to persuade him with words, attempted to psychologically influence him. But Amie made a grave mistake. The safest course of action for stalking victims is never to engage in a fight with their stalker. Amie's kindness was simply distorted by Gareth's stalker illusions, escalating his rage. Gareth was arrested. His preliminary hearing date was repeatedly postponed from June 2020 due to the pandemic restrictions. The next hearing was set for October 25, 2020. If Gareth is found guilty, he faces life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Over 2.5 years after the death of his former fiancée, Drew Carey says Valentine's Day will never be the same for him. "I don't know if I ever want to celebrate Valentine's Day with a dinner. I just don't want to do anything," he says. Drew Carey hopes Amie's death will draw attention to violence in other families, as well as the issue of obsessive stalking. Drew says, "You can't be a person in this country and not know a woman who hasn't been a victim of domestic violence. You just can't, and it's really a problem that not everyone recognizes." Amie's friend, Sharon Little, says, "Every time I feel bad and don't want to get up in the morning, I just say, 'She can't get up, you have to do it. You have to get up for her.'" Amie's parents are very grateful to their daughter's friends for their support and help. They hope that in 2022, justice will finally prevail, and the case of Amie Harwick will be solved, with the criminal facing his punishment. Amie's friends plan to erect a memorial in her honor and for victims of domestic violence. What do you think of this case? Share your opinion in the comments. Like and subscribe to the channel if you like true crime stories. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.